Today I want to talk about why I did not like The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. Hi, my name's Paige, and a few days ago I was reading this for one of the Reading Rush challenges to read a book that has "the" as the first word, and I ended up not liking this. I will be honest and say that I didn't expect to love this book because I don't usually like enemies to lovers. I am way more into friends to lovers just because I think it makes a lot more sense, and those relationships are much safer in my mind. They are built on the foundation of friendship, and I feel like that goes a long way in a relationship. And enemies to lovers, there ends up usually being a pretty solid reason why somebody doesn't like each other, or if there isn't a solid reason, it just comes off very petty why they don't like each other. So I tend to not go for enemies to lovers, and that's just my taste. But I had heard so many good things about this book, and people said that this one really took the enemies to lovers and made it more believable and made it something that wasn't as overdone and cliche, I guess, as some of the other books, is what I seem to get from watching people talk about this book. So I was very interested in reading it, but I ended up really disliking it, and I'm kind of bummed about it. In this video, I will be spoiling the entire plot, sparing no details. I just want to express every thought that I had and kind of explain why I was seeing some things as problematic. And I do want to say that if this is somebody's favorite book, I'm not trying to hurt you in any way. It's just I read this through a different lens than you might have, and I found things based on my past experiences that I did not find okay in this book. So I don't want anyone to think I'm bashing their favorite book and that you are wrong to like this book and think that it is a really good love story. It's just not one that I want in my life. I also want to thank Sydney from A Sydney Story because she was ranting with me over Instagram the entire time, and it was so nice to have somebody who was understanding what I was feeling and thinking while I was reading this, because I was so frustrated with some of the things, and we would just go back and forth between what chapter she was on, what chapter I was on, and we would just rant about all the different stuff. So she did make a reaction video to this, so I will link that here. Am I on the right? Yeah, I think it's here. So that you can watch her video too. So this book has two characters. It has Lucy Hutton, who's our main character, and that's who it's told through, and it has Joshua Templeton, and they are co-workers at a publishing house, I believe it is, and their two previous jobs were rivaling publishing houses that had to come together and form one new job because the market was going down. And so at her workplace, his old work and her old work end up hating each other, and they just end up hating each other too. And the only reason that we are given through the entire book is that on the first day of work, Lucy smiled at Josh and he did not smile back, and that started their feud. So now these two are in the workplace as professionals, arguing and bickering and flirting a little bit and trying to undermine the other and see who is going to be the first person to call HR. So going into this book, I thought I was going to get enemies to lovers, where their dislike was going to be obvious. Maybe somebody said something at one point that the other overheard and it kind of left a bad taste in their mouth, or maybe somebody got a promotion over the other and it wasn't really fair, so that kind of forced a rival, but none of that really happened. And I expected them to have to be forced to work together at some points, realize that they like each other, and then happily ever after. But that's not what I got. I got lots of sexual harassment, complete disregard for somebody's wants or requests, an alpha male complex, possessive jealousy, bit of stalking, bit of gaslighting, cliche after cliche after cliche, and rampant sexist comments from the author. Ugh. So like I said, Josh and Lucy are in their workplace and they are bickering with each other a lot, making fun of each other, doing weird things where they sit in each other's desk, go through their stuff that they've made reports to HR. And it's also said in the past that they have already made these reports to HR before about each other, at least 4 or 5 times on each other. So already red flag number 1 to me. So promotion ends up coming up in their job, and it would make each other their boss. So whoever gets hired would be the person's boss. So they're both qualified for it. They both want to do it. Their respective bosses are helping them try and win this, and seems like a cute, fun story. Okay, they're going to be up for a promotion. Maybe they'll like undermine each other and be a little sneaky with it every now and then. I don't know. Not what happens. So I guess in her need to get this promotion, she wants to get under Josh's skin a little bit. So she dresses way more provocatively than she usually does and comes to work one day, and of course Josh is like, "Ooh, do you have a hot date?" And she goes, "Yeah, I do." And she's lying, obviously, as they do, but she ends up procuring a date by the end of the day. Okay, no big deal, he's not going to catch her in a lie. So this is where the very first problem comes in, and I think this is within the first 75 pages, where she is going to go on the date. Josh offers to drive her because her car's in the shop, and they are in the elevator, and he just turns to her, picks her up, and starts making out with her. As they were going in the elevator, Lucy kept thinking, wow, he's gonna murder me. He might actually murder me. This guy might be a serial killer, and I am just going with him, and I don't trust him, and he's scary and big and huge, and I'm tiny. And then he does that. So that's when I started to get out my highlighter, and I started to highlight things that I started to find really, really crazy. And I will talk about those later, but I'll just continue on going over things that happened. So Josh drives Lucy to the place where she's supposed to have the date and realizes that, oh, she actually does have a date, and gets pretty angry with her. And so Lucy goes in, talks to the guy, his name's Danny, and he's being really kind to her, tells her that she looks beautiful. And she can't believe that she looks beautiful, so she walks away for a second because she's overwhelmed, bumps into Josh, who followed her into the restaurant. And I don't know if he was being rude or kind at this point, but she tells him that she's upset because she can't even believe that she's beautiful because of the things that he's done to her. The date ends, she goes home, and the next day she ends up getting a bouquet of roses in the mail that says something along the lines of, like, you're always beautiful. Okay. Cute. She ends up thinking that they're from Danny, the guy that she just went on a date with, and we all know, obviously, not from him. The flowers are never addressed. They go on. She's at work with him again, and they have to plan this company retreat to team build. And so Lucy has some sort of plan. For some reason, Josh ends up having it, crosses something out, and takes it to the boss. And he ends up undermining her plan and taking the whole staff to paintball. During the paintball game, Josh ends up being very rude to the person that Lucy is dating. He's also in charge of coming up with the teams and ends up putting him and Lucy on the same team every single time. During one of the games that they are not playing with Lucy's ex, Josh sees him across the playing field and just ends up shooting him with the paintball gun for no reason. And during one of the games, somebody shoots Lucy a few too many times because he was getting really into the game, and Josh got very angry and mad about it and yelled at this person for hurting Lucy. Seems like sweet things, but the way that it was written, it just came off very aggressive. So of course, what else happens in romance stories besides one of them gets sick? Lucy, with a fever, she's throwing up, she's super sick and delirious, so of course Josh takes her home to help her. They're not friends at this point, but he's gonna go help her anyway. I will say, this was the one part in the story that I thought, okay, I'm gonna like this. I wasn't really a fan of the way that they were acting before, but as he's taking care of her, he's actually really kind. He's saying really nice things, they're having good conversations, she's telling him how much she wants to be his friend, and it just seems really wholesome. And I thought, okay, this is where their friendship is going to start. Once they've been friends for a little while, then they'll go into lovers. Just because that's what I want in a story. But that's not really what happens. Once Lucy gets better, she and Josh bicker for who knows what reason. All the reasons that they bicker with each other and get mad at each other again and become enemies again are so childish. They get mad at each other, Josh leaves. Lucy's ready to go to work the next day, and Danny ends up driving her to work and tells her that Josh answered the phone calls when he was calling to check up on Lucy and did not relay those messages to Lucy. He also brought her daisies just because he felt like it, and Lucy was still under the impression that he was the one who got her the roses, and so she thanks him for both at this point, and he's a little like, what? I just got you daisies. So they get to work, and on her desk is a single rose, and Josh is all grumpy because Danny is walking Lucy into work, and Josh is just being super rude to Danny. He's just so rude, trying to get him to leave the building because he doesn't work there anymore, and just coming off very snappish and obnoxious. And Lucy doesn't even pay any mind to that. She's focused on the fact that a rose is on her desk, and now she realizes, oh my gosh, those roses from before were from Josh, and they weren't from Danny. Wow, he's been so kind to me, and I've been so rude and so ungrateful to what Josh has been doing for me, and I now need to apologize to him because I've been so rude, which he's being mean in front of the guy that she is dating, and she thinks that she's in the wrong. Great. So more things happen, more going to work, bickering, then being fine with each other, then going back to work and bickering. They're prepping for their interviews, and Lucy somehow is also wrapped up into going as Josh's +1 to his brother's wedding. Another cliche. So all the while, Lucy's realizing that she doesn't actually hate Josh. He's actually kind of nice. But she knows that if one of them gets the job and becomes the other person's boss, that's just not going to work for the dynamic. So she knows that whoever gets the promotion, the other one is going to leave the company. So before this time, she just wants to have one good hookup with him. She ends up realizing that she does want him, and she's pretty forward. She tells him she just wants to kiss him. She just wants to kiss him, and he makes it on his own terms. He turns her down on it and says, no, I want you to go on a date with Danny again. I want you to kiss him, and I want you to decide who you actually want to be with, because, you know, that's normal. So she does go on the date. They end up kissing, her and Danny. No sparks. So like adult, they have a talk and say, not really feeling anything. Let's just be friends. I really like you as a person. I like talking to you and hanging out with you. Sound good? And they both agree. And she ends up choosing Josh, unsurprisingly. But now that they're seeing each other, Josh does, of course, make sure that she knows that she can't see anybody else. Because why wouldn't you have to tell the girl that you're dating that they can't see anybody else? So now they're kissing all the time, making out, going over to each other's house. Lucy's trying to take things further, but Josh isn't having it. He's like, no, we'll do this on my time, and I'm going to make this super romantic and epic and blah, 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 blah. So it's all on him to decide when this will happen. At this point, I don't know if they're doing any work anymore. They're just going to the office so that they can bicker and then go home together. I feel like there is no work being done at all in this place. Throughout this book, it's sometimes been mentioned that Lucy is just too nice of a human. So she is always a pushover, of course. Even though she's an executive, she is a pushover. Always. And just gives free passes to anybody. So at one point, of course, she gets a phone call from one of the coworkers trying to get an extension on a job that they are supposed to have by the end of the day. And Josh is like, I'm gonna sit on the phone and watch you and make sure that you tell them no, and make sure that you tell them that they can't have that extension so that you don't have to be a pushover anymore, because she can't fight her own battles. So more days go by. This story is so long, but more days go by. One of these days, Lucy calls Danny because they are working on a project to help with her promotion. She wants to present a product to show the board of hires, to tell them that she knows what she's doing. So she meets up with Danny, who's been working on this project for her, and they go to a coffee shop together, and guess who follows them? Because that's not weird. And of course, Josh is rude and jealous about it, but whatever. Now they're going to his brother's wedding, and in the car, it just naturally comes up that at one point, when she had dressed all cute, she had lied to him about the date, and Josh gets so mad. The verbiage in this is just, he's so angry. His anger is visceral right now, and it's like, why? You two are already together. Why does it matter that she went on a date with the guy who she only kissed that time because Josh told her to, and now he's angry that she lied about the date, even though she ended up having the date at the end of the day? Okay, so eventually they make it to Josh's brother's wedding. And of course, people are being a little weird around them. They're looking at Josh kind of strangely, saying very weird things like, I'm sorry for what you're having to go through. I know that this is super awkward. I'm glad that you have happiness. Things that are weird. And Lucy, she's a grown-up. She knows that things are going not how she expected. So she's asking him, what is going on? What do I need to know? What am I walking into? And he will not tell her. He changes the subject every single time. Instead of just communicating, she is outright asking him, what is going on? Why are people being so weird? I know something is up. And he refuses to tell her and makes her think that she's going crazy. So she's having to come up with a bunch of different theories in her mind why people are acting this way around him, because he refused to answer her simple question. And of course, you find out that the bride is his ex. Obviously, you could see that from a mile away. So Lucy is so mad because she had asked, and now she feels like an idiot that she didn't know this and that Josh just refused to tell her. So she sneaks out the back, goes and cries on the beach. For whatever reason, his mother follows her out to try and talk to her and be like, no, my son is great. You just don't give up on him. He's just a little stubborn. And first of all, what mother leaves their child's wedding to go comfort her son's crying girlfriend on the beach? I don't know. My family wouldn't do that. They would have just been like, have fun crying. Okay. And secondly, why wasn't Josh the one coming to explain things to her? And eventually he does, after Lucy decides, I'm leaving. So she goes to the hotel room to start packing up, getting ready to go because she's going to catch a bus back home. And Josh follows her in to talk to her, but she's still angry. But Josh tries to justify away why he didn't tell her the truth. And it's mostly because, well, then you wouldn't have come with me. Or you would have been freaking out the whole time. Or you would have just been acting like a different person the whole time. So he chose to not be honest because she couldn't be a grown-up about the situation. Sounds logical. Sounds like somebody I want to be with too. Lucy's still angry. She decides, no, I'm still going to leave, but she has to return a phone call because Danny has called her with an update on the project. She steps outside, starts talking to Danny about what's going on with the project, and he's giving her updates. And then he asks how the wedding was and asks if they can meet for dinner to go over the project the next day so that she can see what's going on with it, see if she likes it and improves it. And he also just jokingly asks, like, ooh, what's your dress like? And Josh overhears this, takes the phone out of Lucy's hand, tells Danny to never call her back again, hangs up on it, and puts Lucy's phone in his pocket because that's healthy. And Lucy asks for it back, and he refuses. So then Josh goes on to justify why he's not a nice guy, and that's because his dad ignored him when he was growing up and preferred his brother. And his brother's the prodigy, and Josh is not because he did not go to medical school, and he decided to get his MBA instead and work at this job that they have. And dad is not proud. So of course, he decides that, well, if dad's not proud of me, then why do I care about what anybody else thinks? So I'm just going to be mean to everybody. And Lucy buys it. She thinks it's justifiable. She thinks it's okay and that he's just sensitive and sometimes he's mean. Literally in the book, she's like, well, it's okay that he's like 40% mean and 60% nice. Oh no, that's a really high ratio. 60% nice is still a failing grade to me. But you know what? They end up sleeping together. Whatever. And I miss fan fiction because fan fiction at least does it right. That was boring. So then the next day they go to breakfast together because why not? Lucy has to drag him along, and at breakfast all the girls are chatting and all the men are reading newspapers at the table because, you know, we're in the 50s. And Josh's dad is ignoring him, doesn't want to talk to him, and when Lucy walks away for 1 second, Josh and his dad end up getting in an argument about Josh's job because, you know, unfunctional family. It happens. So Lucy, of course, comes over to the table ready to defend her man's honor and starts yelling at his dad about how he doesn't understand his son, how he's not being supportive, and sets his dad in his place. And of course, the dad just miraculously understands that he's just misunderstood his son the entire time, their entire relationship, and like, what in the world is this? Why did Lucy have to be the one to fight his fight? Was Josh not just telling her that she needs to fight her own battles? So why is she fighting his battle now? Could Josh not have this conversation with his dad? Like, no, look, this is what my job looks like. You are misunderstanding me. No, it has to be the little 5-foot tall girl who comes in and saves the day. I mean, sure, we like when girls help out and we like when girls can save the day sometimes, but like, does she have to save a man from having a conversation he could have with his father? Whatever, maybe that's just me. So Josh is all grateful. They realize that they're in love with each other, and Lucy's like, oh my gosh, but what's gonna happen about this promotion? What happens if one of us gets it? Like, we can't be together anymore. And Josh is like, I already quit. I have a job at the rivalry publishing place. And she's like, what? What are you talking about? Now I can't go up against anybody. And he's like, no, there's somebody else who highly qualifies, so you still have to prove yourself. So they end up together. And you don't find out if Lucy gets the job. She got the man, though. So that's the whole book. And I am just going to go into a little bit further why I disliked it. Clearly, I wasn't having a good time while I was reading it, but there are just some things that really stuck out that I don't think are acceptable, in my opinion. First off, I will say the one redeeming thing about this book is that the writing is very light, and it's easy to read, and it's pretty funny at times. Can't say that I didn't laugh at a few jokes here and there, but that's about it. The rest of it was not what I wanted. Personally, it has so many cliches. There are just so many things that happen that we've all read the formula for this in so many other books. It wasn't anything new. If you're just throwing together 15 tropes and 15 standard romance events in a book, it doesn't make your book new and exciting. Both of them were like grade A stalkers. They knew so much about each other, and they were like, what? How do you know that about me? I've never said that to you. That was weird. And I think that Josh was basically a watered down Christian Grey, just not as kinky. The writing tried to make Lucy seem really quirky and cutesy, but I thought she was so flat. She's pretty annoying, and the only things you really know about her is that at one point she loves Smurfs, her family likes strawberries, she's obsessed with one singular shade of lipstick, and she pretty much lives for Josh's validation. She constantly puts herself down, and not just in her own mind, she says it out loud to get some of that validation. And she thinks that she's being creepy the entire story because she notices things about Josh, yet he's said some things that she's like, whoa, how did he know that about me? I've never said that. But she doesn't realize that, so she thinks she's being a creepy stalker, but does not think the same about him. She thinks it's like redeeming and cute when he stalks her. And overall, I just think that Sally Thorne made some really poor writing choices in this. One of the very first things that I found unacceptable was that Josh could not keep his hands to himself. I went back and I started highlighting from the beginning every time that Josh puts his hands on Lucy where he doesn't ask first if he could, like, is this okay? Like, oh, come here, let me help you up. Doesn't ask, he just puts his hands on her. Or he touches her and the writing describes the verbiage as forceful or like a vice. Very aggressive verbiage used as he says this. Or when Lucy pulls away from the touch and Josh doesn't let go. So there are 35 times in this book that happens, where Josh's hands are on her and she's either trying to pull away and he does not stop, or it's written as being forceful and aggressive, or he just touches her unprovoked. At one point in this story, when they're having an argument over the roses, Josh pulls out that one line that is what so many guys say that I just think is unacceptable. And he says, that's why I don't do nice things for people. It's never an excuse to just not be a nice human just because things weren't going your way. Come on. He's an adult man, and he's saying this. That's what 12-year-olds say. Thorne writes in this book so many times that Lucy is scared of Josh. She writes in some of her lines that Lucy flinches away from his hand, that she believes that Josh could murder her, that Josh has serial killer eyes. It is like a running joke in this book that Josh has serial killer eyes. I don't like that language. That is just language that, for people who are reading it like I am, that's not okay. Those are huge red flags. To say he lifts his hand and I flinched, that's a red flag. And I don't like the way that it was written in here, and that it comes across like, oh, it's not a really big deal just because he's really big. No. If you're scared of somebody who could potentially hurt you, that's saying something. Thorne also makes it a point to let you know that both Josh and Lucy have been celibate since they knew each other, as if that validifies their relationship a little bit more. Why does it matter? She also writes them as very, very jealous over the fact that they have slept with other people in the past. I don't think that sounds like a healthy relationship. She tries to write Lucy as some powerful workplace woman, but she also has Lucy saying very nasty things about other women. On page 330, she says, I look at her slicked back blonde coil hairdo. Her chalky pink lipstick is too bright against her tan. Hotel Barbie. Does that sound like a woman who is comfortable in her own skin? I feel like that looks like a girl who is scared that her boyfriend is going to look at another girl. That's not confidence in your relationship. That's not showing that you trust him to only want you. Thorne also has an obsession with their size. Lucy is 5 foot tall, and you do not hear the end of that. Every single page has something about her size. Josh is like 6 something or other, and he is very muscular, very built, and she does not let you forget it, that they have a size difference and that Josh can pick her up like a child, and it just comes off pretty creepy to me. I know that some people think that it's really cute to have major size differences, but when it's constantly talked about, it becomes their only personality trait. That's all that you know about these kids, is that one is short, one is tall. And in this, there is pretty sexist language. The way that Thorne chose to describe something is unacceptable to me. On page 170, she writes, the dark brown headboard, plushly upholstered in leather, saves the room from femininity. She's talking about Josh's bedroom. She's saying that his leather furniture makes sure that his room is not too feminine, as if that matters. He can't have a feminine looking room. He can't like things that are beautiful. He has to have manly leather. This book isn't set in the 50s. And the absolute nastiest thing I read in this book is on page 257. My last boyfriend, the last man I had sex with forever ago, was only about 5'6". He could never have picked me up. He'd have ruptured a disc in his fragile boy-sized spine. I understand that people have preferences for height. If you want to date somebody that's taller than you, fine. But to think that that's acceptable in a book is just, it's not okay to me. It's not okay to write that and shame a man for how tall he is. Lucy is 5 foot tall. 5'6" is 6 inches of height that he has over her. Why does that make him invalid? Why does that make him not as much of a man as Josh is just because he's shorter? Why is her being picked up by her boyfriend the only thing that validifies that he's a man? I just thought that the way that was described in the book was disgusting. I don't want girls to read this story and feel like, yeah, I can think this about a guy. I can be prejudiced towards somebody's height. just because he's not the same as this guy who's much taller. I just don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's a healthy mindset, and I don't appreciate that it was written in there. It was disgusting to read, and it just proved to me that this book was not the book for me. I'm sorry for being so mad about it, but there are just some things that I don't want to accept in books. And books that are very sexist and don't really have feminist ideals in them, I don't want to read them, especially ones set in modern time. I understand books that were written in the past had pretty sexist views, and it was acceptable at that time. Some people didn't write stories that were sexist, but it was what romance was at one point. Maybe not every book, but a good chunk of them. But that doesn't mean that we have to accept it now. We don't have to agree with what people write in stories, and we can call them out on these gross things that they say. So overall, I thought this book was really toxic. I thought the characters were not well-rounded, and I thought that they had no chemistry. I felt nothing for them at any point, and that was probably because I was so angry with the choices that were being made in this book. I'm really disappointed in the sexist language and the lack of respect towards consent, and that this is a romance that people think is healthy, where I completely disagree on that. And I'm worried because I've heard so many people say that this was their favorite romance, that they absolutely love this one, and it makes me wonder how many romance stories are like this, how many romance stories have language like this and men like this written into it, and females like this who are petty and think negative things about girls and think negative things about men who like feminine stuff. So this book made me very angry. I rated it 2 stars because it was readable. It wasn't poorly written, but a lot of Sally Thorne's choices were just, they weren't okay how she worded things. I hope this didn't make anybody too mad. These are all my opinions. If you disagree, that's okay with me. If this is still your favorite story, that's okay too. You are allowed to like whatever you like, and I hope that you do. I hope that you got more out of this book than I did, but with my personal experiences, I just found a lot of it unacceptable. I'm a little scared to say this, but let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my thoughts in this, if I have pointed out anything that you didn't realize about this book, and subscribe if you want to see me get angry about any other future books that I might read. If you made it all the way through, thank you so much. I will see you later. Bye.